morning, Cinque. I really liked your video on Friday. I think you made a good point about how we shouldn't be, valued for what our grades or our SAT scores are. Oh, by the way, when I was in Williamsburg, I was wearing my Tifio shirt. This is not my Tifio shirt. And one of the guys, in costume, came up to me, and he was like, DFTBA. And I was like, how cool is that? There are nerd fighters in colonial Williamsburg. So while I was in Washington, I went to the Air and Space Museum, and I found this book. It's titled How I Killed Pluto and Why It Had It Coming by Mike Brown. Now, the interesting thing about Mike Brown is that he didn't actually have anything to really do with Pluto other than getting its rank demoted from planet to dwarf planet. Instead, Mr. Brown was actually very good at finding objects in the Kuiper Belt. Now, the Kuiper Belt is kind of this area of space that's beyond Neptune. I suppose you could almost think of it like the asteroid belt, but beyond Neptune. The most interesting thing that Mr. Brown found out there was Eris, which is now classified as a dwarf planet. It's just beyond Pluto, and I'm not exactly sure which one's bigger. There was some dispute about that. Depending on how you measured Pluto, Eris could be bigger or smaller, but it's not bigger by a huge amount. Anyway, when Mr. Brown first announced this discovery, Eris was called Xena back then, and it was the 10th planet. But of course, we don't have 10 planets in our solar system, so what happened? There was a conference for astronomers in Paraguay, I think, and what they were trying to decide on is how many planets are there in the solar system and what exactly is the definition of a planet. The first definition included basically anything that was round and orbited the sun, but it didn't really include everything that was round. At this point in the game, there were actually 12 planets. There were the 9 that you're already familiar with, and then there was Ceres, which is in the asteroid belt, Charon, which is Pluto's moon, and then Xena, which is the planet that Mr. Brown found. Now, Mike Brown was sent an email saying that his discovery was going to be a planet, so he would be the only planet finder alive. Yet Mr. Brown wasn't really happy about this, because the astronomers, at least in his eyes, weren't classifying the solar system in a scientific way. So he ended up speaking out against their decision, and this resulted in a lot of the astronomers who were at the meeting to rethink what they had been voting on. The conference ended with a vote on the planet resolution. Now, the resolution came in 2 parts. The first part basically defined the planets as just being Mercury through Neptune. The second part of the resolution was a little bit trickier. It defined the planets that we know as the planets now as classical planets, and the other planets that are no longer planets as dwarf planets. Now, what's interesting about that is because you put an adjective planet for both of those, it sort of still keeps Pluto as a planet. So basically there are these planet conspirators trying to keep Pluto in as a planet. But that part of the resolution was voted down, so Pluto is not a planet. It's a dwarf planet. The term dwarf planet is kind of weird because dwarf planet is not really a planet. It's the same way a chocolate bunny isn't really a bunny, or a Matchbox car isn't really a car. It's just kind of, I guess, a way for the public to feel better about Pluto not actually being a planet anymore. So I think that's everything, and I'll be seeing you Friday!